I'll start. I'll start now by asking Father Pat and thanking him for having us here tonight. And we'll ask him, does he remember much of his school days across the river in Bruskey?
As I said before, there are two things mitigate against me. One is my old age, where memory is getting very, very difficult. And the other, the fact that I appeared in Bruskey school was at for about 3 years, my first 3 years at school. So I do not really remember an awful lot about it. A few things stick out, but I remember some of the pupils, but not many of them are dead.
I understand that now, Father, but do you remember who brought you to school? Who did you go to school with first?
Well, Ned, my brother Ned and John were going to school, and I just went with them.
That's good. Well, who was your teacher? Do you remember the teacher? That's maybe giving you a lot, but first teacher.
Oh, I remember the teacher. Master Martin was teaching in Bruskey School at the time, and he had a very good reputation as a head teacher. And the assistant teacher at that time was Miss Coyle.
She would have become, she later taught in Locked Up. Is that the same person?
No, a sister.
Another sister?
Another sister, yeah. She was the younger sister of Miss Coyle that taught in Locked Up. I have very vivid reasons for remembering her. When I went to school first, I was a kiddo. You know what a kiddo
I do indeed.
And of course, taking up a pencil or
something to write.
Whether to write with was in my left hand. And she came down first time at school and took the pencil from one hand, put it in the right hand, told me I was to write with it. And of course I couldn't write with it.
You couldn't have.
So every time she looked down and saw me with the pencil in my left hand, she came down on the knuckles.
Yeah.
With a ruler.
And nowadays it is allowed to write with whichever hand you feel.
Yeah. Well, I understand it's the correct thing. It is said that if you change your system of writing, say from left to right and from right to left, you are affecting the natural growth and the natural inclination of the person. But otherwise, you can become in some way odd.
Yeah, I'm quite sure you can.
And,
but
that's why I'm odd.
You're not too odd, Father. You're very, very good indeed. Well, now, your parents, your father's name was...
like my own, Patrick.
And your mother's name was her maiden name?
Margaret. Margaret Smith.
Margaret Smith. And where did she come from?
Just next door neighbour, practically.
Thomas Smith.
She'd be an aunt of Tommy's.
An aunt of Tommy Smith.
And the late Ned.
And how many?
All that.
Yes. How many were in your family? How many brothers and sisters did you have?
9 living. One died in childhood.
Would you name them for us, if you please, Father?
Starting from the top was James, who was later bishop. Then Fanny, who married Conor Carrigan up in Carrigan. Mary, who joined the Medical Missionaries, known then as Mother Joseph. Bridgie, who later married Harry McInerney. Not in the right order.
Well, it doesn't really matter, anyway, no.
The boys so far were Ned and John and myself. Then there was Roseanne, who married Eugene Carney outside Granor, and Teresa, who later married Tom Boylan and died very tragically some years ago.
Yeah, God rest her soul. I knew Teresa.
Yeah.
In your family, Father Pat, I've noticed you mentioned Dr. James. He was the bishop in Calabar in Nigeria. And you had another sister, you said, in the Benedict sisters.
In the medical missionaries.
Medical missionaries. That was mission to China, is it?
No, to Africa at that time.
Yeah.
Actually, Bishop James had a good deal to do with the establishment of the medical missionaries of Mary. It was he who received Mother Norton out in Calabar when she was in danger of death. And she was sent home to Ireland and recuperated and became a very active and wonderful woman.
That was wonderful to hear. And then, going back even farther again, the clergy seemed to be very much in the Moynagh family. Back, your uncles, you had an uncle priest as well.
Yeah, there was Father John, as we call him. He was Monsignor John, who went out to Australia on a very historic voyage. It was to be his first and last voyage. He never came home. He was, first of all, he went to school up in Latin school in Ballymehew, and then on to All Hallows, and was ordained in All Hallows for Australia. On the journey out, the ship they were on was not very comfortable and not very secure. They had to put in at a number of ports for repairs. One of the repairs took some months, and eventually landed in Australia. He was for the Diocese of Sydney, and he never came back. He would never face that journey back.
So he hadn't come home. Did you hear from him again? Did he write?
Well, he used to write to my father.
Yeah,
at least once a year.
He didn't come back more to Ireland.
Oh no.
No, the journey was so bad and so long.
I never
Transport was so slow.
seen him, and as I say, he just communicated with my father.
Well, after you finished the national school, now, Father, you went to college. Which college did you go to at first?
I went to St. Mel's in Longford.
St. Mel's was and still is a very good school.
Yeah. And at that time, a very hard school in many ways.
When you go to St. Mel's, what age did you start? Do you remember, like, what you were 13, 14, around that age when you started?
Well, I think I was rather old at the time, because first of all,
changing the year from one school to the other kept you back that 1 year.
well, it wasn't only that, but it was circumstances of the family. The bishop was still in college. He wasn't ordained till 1930. And I spent a good part of a year more helping around the farm.
Before you moved out to St. Mel's.
Until he was ordained, I couldn't start my secondary education. So it was 1930. He was ordained in 1930, and the following September, I went to St. Mel's.
Going to St. Mel's College that time was a big move from home for a young fella. A young boy at 14 or 15. How did you feel when you landed at St. Mel's in the first week or so? I'm quite sure you wouldn't forget that. It must have been a pretty lonely place, and you would be a bit odd with the surroundings.
It was quite a shock. In those days, they hadn't the accommodation they have now in public schools, you were put into a dormitory, and that dormitory was divided up into cubicles. So you had a bed and a little locker, a place to hang your clothes, and that was about it.
More like a prison cell.
Prison cells would be much more comfortable than at least.
Did you feel lonely for a while?
I can't remember feeling lonely. I had 3 good pals already going to Longford, to St. Mellon's that year. 2 brothers down from Dingens, and I knew them in
The Bannons, would it be?
Bannons, yeah.
Yeah, the Bannons.
I knew them in the national school in Lockdown, so I wasn't lonely, and you soon, at that age, you pick up friends.
Well, ask you now, at what stage in your young life did you think or believe you had a vocation? It's not an easy question, I know, but maybe you'll be able to give us that never had vocations, some idea of what way you would feel or how you would be thinking coming up to the time when you'd be finishing in the secondary school like St. Mellon's.
It's a difficult question. It's not a question of sitting down seriously and thinking, oh, what am I going to do with my life? It's something that gradually grows on you. And I suppose I had a very good example, and say my uncle being a priest out in Australia, and then my brother James in Maynooth, and his ordination, and gradually you get acclimatized to an idea, and I cannot say that it came to a point when I made a definite decision. That decision came in St. Mellon's when I decided to go to St. Peter's College in Wexford. And I may have been influenced there by the fact that 3 or 4 of my footballing fellows in St. Mellon's had already gone to St. Peter's the year before. But whether it be St. Peter's or Carlo or Hollis, that idea was firmly established in my mind that I would like to be a priest.
And after you were ordained, Father Pat, where did you first serve? What parish did you in? Did you serve in this country or did you emigrate?
I was appointed to a parish in Yorkshire in England, St. George's in York. That was my first parish.
That's right. And how did you find the place in England over your first time over there, and what were the people like and so forth?
Well, it was a very difficult time. That was in 1941, in the middle of the war. So it was a question of arriving in blackout, rationing, all the various hardships. And I remember travelling by train from Holyhead all the way to York to arrive there about 10 o'clock at night, because travelling was very difficult then. It was if a military train was on the route, and we met a couple of them on that occasion, and the train had to pull in at a station and wait until the military got through. So it was about 10 o'clock or so when I arrived in York Station. And there was one person standing on a platform, and it was a priest, and I thought, this must be waiting for me. So it was my fellow curate, for the next 13 years. Father Breen from Tipperary, now dead, known him as and we had to put my luggage into a cloakroom, and there was no such thing as a taxi at that time. Taxis wouldn't just take.
Petrol would be scarce, much every other way. So.
Oh yeah, and they were limited in the journey they could make. So I put in my luggage into the cloakroom and went back for the next day. So we walked from there then through the city of York in half darkness. So I didn't see much of it in the next day.
Well, in the war years, Father, was certainly a tough time, and you remember so vividly in there for through almost it all from 1941 until 1945. That was a tough time in England, I'm sure.
Oh, it was very tough, but like everything else, you got used to it, and parishioners were very, very helpful. If they had any spare rations going, they'd give it to the priest.
And that was very good.
Yeah.
It was good. And could you give us some examples of some of the hardships and the tragedies that you happened to come across during your time there in them years?
Well, in that particular parish I was in, it was a lot of poor, and existed in very poor, what they call two up and two down, if you know what I mean by that. The house consisted of a sitting room and a kitchen and the 2 bedrooms upstairs.
That was it. That done a family?
No facilities, toiletry, etc. was outside in the yard. And some of those houses were extremely poor.
Extremely poor. Yeah. Yet no, the people who lived there were very decent people, I'm sure.
Oh, they were, but you get a mixture, you know. You get some that fell off their faith, you know, and give up. Consider themselves good Catholics, but
you remember one great tragedy with the nuns you were telling us before we went on tape. Could you maybe tell us that? It was a very sad incident.
Oh, it was during the war when there was a serious air raid on York. It was a reprisal raid, really, because there was a very big raid in Cologne, and York was a cathedral city, just as Cologne was. So there was a reprisal raid, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was wakened up by my fellow curate. Drew back the curtains, and there were Molotov baskets just coming down out of the sky. You know, you could see them quite plainly. So it was a bit of a shock, and soon brought us to our senses. And we had an air raid warden centre near us down in our school. So we headed for that. That was the first principle, that in an air raid everyone reported to their centre. And we got down there and there was nobody there. All the watchers had gone home to their families to look after their people. So we set off from there to investigate where the bombs had fallen. So it was mostly in the centre of the city. We went down as far as we could. We were stopped by the police at a certain spot, and we got a report that the convent was hit. There was a very important convent near the station. They ran a school, and a very large number of nuns in that convent, teachers, all of them, and we decided to investigate, and we made our way towards that, and when we got there, it was chaotic, really. There was tragedy everywhere, and there were five nuns killed that night. There were dropped a time bomb on a wing, and that wing housed the older sisters in the convent, the old people, and some of the younger sisters went to investigate after this had dropped, to look after and see what had happened to the older sisters, women who were on that end of that wing, and of course they were travelling along just by a dim flashlight, and they came across a crater which they didn't see, and they fell into it, and 5 of those nuns were blown up in the time bomb.
That was a terrible tragedy.
Yeah.
You remember seeing their coffins after?
Oh yeah, we were at the Requiem Mass, and the 5 coffins lined up in front of the altar.
Terrible sad.
It was
Terrible sad
terrible
indeed.
experience, yeah.
Thank you very much, Father Pat, and I wish you'd have many, many years in your retirement, and we hope we will have a chat with you again, and you will probably come over to Bruskey, and this tape has been lodged, and when the old school 100 years of age will be officially celebrated with a Mass in Bruskey Chapel, which I'm sure you will help celebrate, and probably to Crover that night to the party and the refreshments. Yeah. Now, John, we're going to put you on a bit of history of your lovely local townland that you're so proud of. In the townland of Legway, there's a good bit of history attached to it. I believe there was a school at one stage in Legway.
Yeah, there was a school just at the longer road beside
At the mouth of your lane?
At the mouth of the lane,
Is there any part of that, any remains of that school left? Could you give us any little bit of history of it at all?
Well, you can see the walls over there still, and there was what they used to call a sheep in a public house, one side of it too.
Do you ever be talking to any old people when you were very young? Because remember any kind of activity about the sheepy or the school?
Well, not much about the school, but the old people, my father used to be able to tell about the land league.
Yeah, I was going to get on to that now. But we'll talk about the pub. Was there any action? You don't remember the pub there?
No, he didn't remember it. In fact, even before his time.
It would. Yeah. Well, along with having the school at Legway and the pub as well, you had a couple of corn mills around this part of the county. In Legway alone, there was one corn mill, wasn't
That's right. Creighton's mill was in Legway.
What did they work on there mostly?
Corn.
The oats and stuff like that. And there was another one then, was there as well, further up the road?
Another one in Glan, McDermott's at Glan was another one.
You said 2 corn mills in the parish at the time.
Right, yeah.
Well, then Legway itself was noted back at the end of the last century, or the turn of the century, during the time of the Land League. Could you give us a bit of the history about that and about what happened around that time in your own words, very gently? You can tell us maybe from memory, not from your own memory, but from what you heard.
Yeah, well, just I heard that Mrs. Carrigan was a widow woman, and she was evicted from her home in Legway, and was a great priest locked up at the time, Father Carrigan, and he used to organise the Land League.
Yeah, the Land League was going at that. That'd be the time of Parnell, round about that time.
Yeah. So they turned out and built the house for her in one day, and there's a song about it.
There's a song about it.
Yeah.
And it's great to know that, and she still maintained to keep her farming land.
That's right.
And that was wonderful. That was under tremendous pressure at the time, because you were under a different type of system of government in this country than there is nowadays, and it was great that the people were able to band together under any kind of leadership and be able to keep the people in their farms and land.
That's right.
And now, John, thanks very much for that. And now, John, we're going to ask you to recite that famous song from, I think it's dated back until, what year was it? I think it was
1888.
1888. Well, that's a long time ago. That's 109 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was in June. And now we're in the month of June. Wasn't it? What month?
18th
of June. And this is the 8th day of June.
That's right.
So it's 109 years or about 10 days. So it's nice after all that time to talk to a man from the townland of Legway. And now, John, we'll ask you in your own time to recite the song which was written by, maybe you'll be able to remember who did it. And take your time and read this out for us, because this is history in motion, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I'll try and read it as best I can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it gives the story of it there.
Yeah, top on it first.
Top of it. Well, the story is related in the following ballad is a true story, a common enough event throughout Ireland in the 1880s when Mrs. Galligan, a widow with her family, failed to pay her exorbitant rent. The landlord was Dace was his name at the time, and his bailiff had our cabin knocked to the ground. The parish priest, Father Carrigan, organised the parish and surrounding parishes to build for her a house for her and her family. So this took place on the 18th day of June in 1888. So there was a song made about it, and I'll try and read it for you as best I can. Come listen all true Irishmen, and tell you here poetry of the noble work of cabin men, the matchless grand display. They assemble in their thousands on the 18th day of June to show their love for fatherland and seal the tyrant's doom. The men of Moynagh marched foremost in the field, the laurels that they nobly wore would be their shield. The object of this meeting was to erect a home for a poor evicted woman who was destined out to roam. For from a cruel landlord no mercy could be found. The cot she loved so dearly levelled to the ground. And the star of Moynagh took up the noble cause and gained the noble victory over cruel British laws. I mean brave Father Carrigan, who was always to the fore, who could always lend assistance to the sons of Bruskey, and with him in great numbers that they did appear, that made the landlord crouch and shake with fear. To erect for Mrs. Galligan a cottage on the hill, where she could guard her farm and deny the landlord still. That it may be a warning for future days to see that evictions are a losing cause for Dace and Rottenlee. From Arva and from Cavan they appeared upon the scene, likewise the Ballan Temple boys, who always loved the green. With green flags floating in the air, the band played Patrick's Day, to knell the landlord down to rest until the judgment day. The hills were decorated most glorious for to see, with fiddlers and fifers, with drummers 2 or 3. They played down by the waterside, the echo it was grand, but there came none there that could compare with the Ballan Temple band. This noble work was undertaken at the noontide of the day, and at the hour of 4 o'clock this noble work was done. To the Moynagh men the greatest praise is due, from the first stone to the last they built and carried through. All honour to those brave men for the noble path they bore, their names shall be recorded around Hibernia's shore. It's true It was a grand sight in Ligwy on that day to see Loch Duff and Allen Temple join in grand hooray. Now to conclude and finish, the day is near at hand, when vile exterminators will be driven from our land, and all who join in heart and hand in this great and noble cause will welcome home brave Parnell to make our nation's laws. When home rule is granted and our nation is in full bloom, think of the Land League meeting on the 18th day of June.
Thank you very much, John. That was very good. Absolutely wonderful. That is worth keeping, and a wonderful verse. Peter, it's great to see you here tonight with us.